Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'll be talking you through my top 5 cycling routes here in Mallorca. Now this list is purely my personal preference, so if you disagree, no worries, you're more than welcome to have your own top 5. I'm not stopping you. I've aimed for a variety of route lengths, difficulties and locations, but you will notice a common theme. They all revolve around the stunning Serra de Tramuntana mountain range. It is my go-to playground for cycling. Sure, there are fantastic rides all over the island, but the Tramuntana is where you'll find those unforgettable roads that you'll be daydreaming about for months and years after your trip. I'll walk you through the highlights of each route, the key climbs and descents, the best places to stop for a quick refuel, and even some bonus variations for those of you who can't resist an extra climb or two. In the video description, you'll find the Strava route files. These are based on the rides that I've done, so you might need to tweak them a bit depending on where you're starting. Luckily, most of these are circular routes, so you can easily pick them up near your location or adjust them as needed. If you do spot any glaring errors or omissions, or just want to share your own favourites, let me know in the comments. I'll be compiling a list of shorter recovery rides in the not too distant future. But for now, let's kick things off with number 5, the Orient Valley Loop. The first route on this list is actually the longest, at around 135 kilometers in length and totaling nearly 2,500 meters elevation gain. This route is a challenging day out by anybody's standards. If you're starting in the north, you'll begin the day with the beautiful Col de Formentor, a climb more famous for its descent, but nonetheless a great stretch of road featuring stunning views over Pollença and at times, moonscape quality with large limestone boulders dotted along the road's perimeter. At a length of 9 kilometers and an average gradient of 5%, it represents a long-ish but relatively gentle-ish start to the day. From the top of the Formentor, you'll have another 20 minutes of riding before you get to the first pit stop of the day, the infamous Repsol Garage. This is a great stop to fill your bottles and assess your food supplies, as it will not be until Soia, around 30 hilly kilometers away, that you'll have a chance to refuel. This next portion of the ride will see you riding the famously smooth tarmac of the MA10, twisting and turning on rolling terrain before passing the turn for Sa Calobra, which you are free to tack onto your ride, but it will take the day into wow what a whopper territory. Before long, you'll have passed the beautiful Gorg Blau, an artificial reservoir and source of drinking water for the people of Palma. Next up is the climb of the north side of Pic Major, or Puig Mahor, if you want to impress your friends. This is the much easier ascent and is only 5 kilometers at 5.5%. After a morning of mainly climbing, it is now time for your reward, the descent to Soia from the top of Pic Major, Mallorca's tallest mountain. At over 14 kilometers in length, this is arguably the best descent on the entire island, with the qualities that dull its ascent becoming fast and flowy on the way back down. Please do remember to be careful. It can be tempting to get a bit carried away, so remember to ride within your limits and be prepared for oncoming traffic, as cars will often be overtaking cyclists coming the other direction. Once you've come back down to earth, you'll have arrived in Soia with 60 kilometers in your legs. So it's probably time for a bocadillo or a slice of cake. There are a multitude of options in Soia, whether that's for a quick stop at a roadside cafe or something more leisurely in the beautiful town itself. Don't get too full though. Next up is the Col de Soia, one of the biggest and most challenging climbs on the island. Following an initial busy drag out of town, you'll quickly turn off for the start of the climb proper. Often, and somewhat hyperbolically, compared to Alpe d'Huez, Col de Soia is not to be sniffed at. With 16 hairpins on the north ascent, it zigzags its way for 7 kilometers at an average gradient of 6%. Originally, this was the only way in or out of town, but since the tunnel was built in 1997, the climb is almost completely free of traffic. Once you're at the top, you'll be heading straight back down the southern side of the climb, a road equally as serpentine and with a road surface that does leave a little to be desired, creating a descent far more technical than Pic Major, so definitely one to take your time on. From here you'll move towards the Orient Valley via the stunning mountain town of Bunyola, quickly followed by the Col de Ona. At 6 kilometers and 6%, this is another decent sized climb on quiet roads through a beautiful forested landscape. The descent down into the Orient Valley is also over quite rough roads and tight hairpins, so another one to be careful on. Before long, you'll be descending further towards Alaro on a fun, fast and frustratingly short descent off Col de Orient, before gradually losing elevation on easier rolling terrain via quiet back roads through farmland towards Selva and onwards to Campanet and the end of the ride. With most of these routes, you will obviously have a choice whether to ride them clockwise or anti-clockwise. There will be pros and cons to each, but I would say this route is much more clear-cut as to which is best, with the anti-clockwise variation outlined here providing a gentler end to the day as well as a spectacular descent off Big Major, as opposed to the relentless slog you'll get heading in the other direction. Hi everyone, apologies for the disruption to your usual programming. I'm here with a very quick favour to ask. Now this is something I've avoided doing for fear of coming across as sad, needy, desperate, but I've since realised that I'm all three of those things. So if you are enjoying these videos, please do subscribe. It means that more people are able to watch them, and it does give me that validation that I so clearly and desperately crave. Anyway, back to the video. Moving on to number 4, with everyone's favourite meat and potatoes bang for your buck ride, the Garage Loop. I recently made a full-length video on this route, so I'll keep this entry a bit briefer and encourage you to check out that video once you've finished this one. Now, depending on your direction, you'll either start with the quiet farm roads towards Campanet and onto Caimari before climbing the Col de Sabataya, or you'll begin with the serene tree-lined tarmac of the MA10, passing Pollença Old Town en route to the Col de Formentor. Which direction you choose should depend on the other rides you have planned. If you're only in Mallorca for a few days, consider varying your routes to avoid doubling up on climbs. That said, if I had to choose one variation, I'd go for the Sabataya climb and Formentor descent. My go-to option, probably about 60% of the time. The Garage Loop is popular for good reason. At just 65 kilometers and around 800 meters of elevation gain, it can be completed in 2 to 3 hours, or even less if you really get your skates on. You'll get a classic climb and descent while still having time for a more relaxed day. The Sabataya climb is one of my absolute favourites on the island. It's 8 kilometers long with a 5% gradient and 3 distinct sections. You've got peaceful switchbacks through pine forests, a flatter section with stunning valley views, and a final challenging set of switchbacks up the top. If you're feeling hungry, the cafe at the Repsol garage offers great value, operating independently within the more expensive petrol station. Once refueled, it's a 20-minute ride to the Formentor. For the culturally inclined, there's an optional stop at the Yuk Monastery, a pilgrimage site dating back to the 13th century. There's also a cafe open during peak months if the Repsol garage doesn't appeal. The Formentor descent rivals Big Major for fun, with sweeping corners and excellent visibility that let you maintain momentum safely. But as always, ride within your limits. Some technical corners and damp areas in winter warrant caution. Now, about Sa Calobra. It is absent from this list due to its isolated location, which makes including it in a loop a bit tricky without significant out and back sections. But if you're keen, you can add it to several rides, including the Garage Loop. Just continue south on the MA10 from the Repsol garage and you'll eventually reach the viaduct and the turn to Sa Calobra. Be warned though, this detour adds about 40 kilometers and 1500 meters of climbing. It's deceptively long and includes an extra climb before the descent into Sa Calobra, so plan accordingly. I'm going to begin the entry at number 3 with an apology for the lack of quality video of this route. In a move reminiscent of the man who threw his hard drive of Bitcoin into landfill, I somehow deleted the majority of footage I have of this ride. The southern portion of the MA10 contains, in my opinion, the greatest stretch of road on the entirety of Mallorca. Leaving Esporles and heading in an anti-clockwise direction, you'll soon pick up the MA10 as it bends its way southward towards Banyalbufar and onto Estelens. You'll have uninterrupted views out over the Mediterranean and down the coast, with dramatic cliffs as far as the eye can see. Luckily for you, this will be your view for the next hour or so, as you twist and turn and rise and fall over smooth and rolling terrain towards Andratx. Taking the simplest loop, you will cover 65 kilometers and approximately 1500 meters of elevation, distributed over 6 lesser known climbs, with the peaceful, quiet inland climbs of Galilea and Esgrau providing the sternest challenges, both of which averaging around 5%. Along this route you'll go through many quaint towns, each offering plentiful opportunities for food and refreshments, so you shouldn't ever be too far from a chance to refuel, which does beg the question of how I allowed this route to be the site of my all-time worst bonk. If you're based in Palma, this will no doubt be your regular ride. Heading out and back via Col de Sa Calobra, you'll add an extra 35 kilometers and 700 meters of elevation. This route can be enjoyed in both directions, but gets the anti-clockwise nod from me, purely because the jaw-dropping section between Esporles and Banyalbufar is best enjoyed going downhill with the wind in your hair, especially the remarkably fun descent off Col de Sa Bastida. There is also one other route variation for the true sickos out there. Instead of heading inland at Escabdea, continue onwards to Calvia and follow the signs to Establement, where you can soon turn off to take on Sobrement. This is the hardest climb in Mallorca, with sustained gradients of more than 20% and a road surface closer to something you'd find in the UK. This is a serious challenge with generous gearing advised. Coming in at number 2 and just narrowly missing out on the top spot is Mallorca's most famous ride, and probably, pound for pound, the best bike ride in the world, the Lighthouse Ride. I'm currently lucky enough to call the road to Cap Formentor my local training lap, and even when you ride it twice a week, it never gets old. This route is the shortest on the list at only 40 kilometers, but over that short distance you'll gain around 900 meters in elevation. Starting in Port de Pollença, you'll be immediately confronted by the first climb of the route, the Col de Sa Calobra. This is actually the largest climb on the ride, averaging 6.5% for just over 3 kilometers. After a couple of early switchbacks, you will soon have stunning views over Pollença Bay and the Tramuntana mountains. The road snakes its way up, maintaining a steady and consistent gradient until you reach the car park for the Mirador Escolomer lookout point. It's probably a little early in the ride for a snack, but if you do fancy it, there is a food stand here. Immediately, you'll be heading back downhill over the north side of the Crueta on an incredibly fun and varied descent. After a couple of tricky hairpins, you'll have a flowy section that twists back and forth, the road obscured from view before revealing itself as a simple manoeuvre at the last second. After a few rides practice, and if you can hold your nerve, you'll be able to descend much of this without the need for brakes. As with the majority of this route, the views are rarely short spectacular, with a dramatic cliffside drop to your left overlooking the blue Mediterranean Sea and the picturesque Escolomer Island. After around 5 minutes of descending, you will arrive back at sea level and Formentor Beach, one of the best on the island and well worth a trip if you have the time. Today though, you'll follow the road left and continue with the car park on your right. The next section takes you on a false flat uphill for about 5 kilometers through serene pine forest and vineyards. It is probably the only section of the route that fails to attain a 10 out of 10 rating, but it is enjoyable nonetheless. Once you're out of the woods, the road will begin to point uphill once more. You will see large imposing limestone cliffs ahead that before long you will pass through via the famous tunnel, with the isolated sands of Calafiguera down to your left. The next sections twists and turns along the peninsula, the road contorting to the only path possible along its undulating length. Sweeping right-handers will give way to short uphill dashes towards pockets of forests before opening up once more to panoramic views across Pollença Bay. Soon you'll be nearing the end of the outward leg, with a gap in the rock revealing the lighthouse down to your left for the first time. Swooping around a tight and fast corner, remember to take care as you tackle this quick and often windy descent to the lighthouse. One last sweeping right-hander will take you to the bottom of the final climb of this leg, with the lighthouse now tantalisingly close. Photographs are obligatory, and there may even be a goat or two looking to crash your picture. You'll have the option for a coffee and cake at the cafe, and then it's time to turn around. Some mountain bike rides can feel a bit boring, with only what was once on your left now being on your right. This, however, is not like that. Since you started this ride at sea level and finished the outward leg above it, the return journey is actually slightly downhill and has some sections that are very fast, fun and technical. This does bring me on to the only negative aspect of this ride, which is the traffic. Sadly for us cyclists, we are not the only ones looking to enjoy this incredible road, and during the peak months it can be quite busy. Generally, this is only a minor annoyance, but there are a couple of corners where you will need to be careful. It is not uncommon for tourists in rental cars, or locals for that matter, to cut blind corners, leaving you with little time to swerve or emergency brake, so be warned. The climb back up to the car park is probably more interesting and varied than the south side ascent, but it does have less interesting views. The descent back down to Porto Pollença is another cracker. Most of the way down you'll have good visibility of what is coming up, making it possible to generate quite a bit of speed. That being said, the big left-hander about halfway down requires your full attention, as a bus coming the other way will mean your lane is completely blocked. This ride truly does have it all, but if you're looking to make it even better, try riding first thing in the morning or just before sunset. If you want to add on a bonus climb, consider heading up to the watchtower by following the road opposite the food van at the car park. This will give you an extra 100 or so meters of elevation and will grant you the best vantage point for miles around. Probably why they stuck a watchtower up there. If you're feeling brave, you can even climb a rusty old ladder to get to the top. Something not advised in cleats. So you might be wondering how anything could possibly top the Lighthouse. Well, that brings us to the number one spot on this list, the MA10. Just edging out the Lighthouse, the MA10 claims the top position purely for the sheer quantity of quality that it delivers. Spanning 115 kilometers with around 2,500 meters of elevation gain, this ride has everything you could dream of. You can tackle the MA10 in either direction and be guaranteed one of the best days you'll ever spend on a bike. This road traces the entire west coast of the island and is celebrated as one of the world's finest by cyclists, drivers and motorcyclists alike. Its endless corners, challenging climbs and breathtaking coastal views make it a true gem. For this entry, let's start in Andratx. If you're staying in the north, you can take advantage of Mallorca Bike Shuttle's taxi services to get dropped off here. Since this is a point-to-point route, a bit of logistical planning is needed, but it's all worth it. From the start, you'll face the Col de Sa Calobra, a gentle 5% gradient over 5 kilometers that eases you into a day of near constant climbing or descending. The road is smooth and wide, offering good views, a pleasant warm-up, but probably not the most memorable part of your day. Once you crest the top, the real magic begins. After a brief bumpy descent, you'll find yourself on the stunning coastal stretch of the MA10. For the next 50 kilometers, you'll enjoy almost uninterrupted sea views on tarmac that is never less than perfect. As we mentioned in entry number 3, you'll wind your way through charming coastal villages, navigating twists and turns before heading inland for some sustained climbing. Starting in Banyalbufar, you'll ascend the Col de Sa Bastida, followed quickly by the Col d'en Claret. But don't worry, your sea views aren't over. From the Claret, you'll catch glimpses of Palma and the southern coast way down below. Next, you'll descend towards Valdemossa and Dea, both excellent spots for a lunch break. The rolling terrain continues to impress, eventually leading you to Sóller and the imposing climb of Pic Major, Mallorca's longest ascent. After a morning of relentless visual delights, the steady pace of Pic Major offers a welcome, calming change of pace. I've got to give it some credit. However, stay alert, as this road can be busy with cars. With 75 kilometers behind you, take a moment to savour the spectacular views over Sóller before tackling the final stretch. At nearly 1,000 meters above sea level, the remaining 40 kilometers will fly by as you descend towards Gorgblau, past Sa Calobra and onward to the Formentor for the day's final descent. This route is a popular choice for adding Sa Calobra, often called the Big Daddy ride. There are also additional climbs that veer off the MA10 down to coastal towns like the Port de Valdemossa and Port des Canonges. If you're curious about more, I covered all of these in my Hardest 100 video, the ultimate wow what a whopper day out. So thanks for watching. I feel confident with this list. I think it's not too controversial, but I know some of you will disagree. Please be nice and chuck your comments down below, and do remember to subscribe. I will love you forever and ever. Bye.